This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam, and I'm your host, help taking your leadership to the next level. This week on the podcast, we interview Adrian Bracy. She is an MBA and CPA, an author, business and personal coach, consultant, and motivational speaker. She's also the retired Chief Executive Officer of the YWCA in Metro St. Louis, where she served for nearly 12 years. After spending 18 years in senior financial management with the National Football League, the Miami Dolphins, St. Louis Rams, and the Arizona Cardinals, Bracy transitioned to the nonprofit sector to follow her passion, that is, to inspire and make a difference in the lives of women and girls. Bracy has received numerous awards throughout her career, including the Black Enterprise 50 Most Powerful Blacks in Sports, Black Enterprise 50 Most Powerful Women in Business, and the St. Louis Business Journal's Most Influential Business Women. She graduated from the Morgan State University in Baltimore with a degree in accounting and from Nova Southeastern University with a master's in business administration. Bracy is a certified John Maxwell coach, trainer, and speaker, and is certified through the CAPP Institute Coaching and Positive Psychology. She and her husband Vernon have one son, Donovan, and are members of the Shalom Church, City of Peace. This is a great conversation with Adrian, and it spans a wide variety of topics, and I think you will be greatly blessed for listening. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Richard with his conversation with Adrian Bracy.
Well, everyone, it's my privilege to have Adrian Bracy here with me today. And of course, this is always a highlight for me when I get to interview leaders from across the country and the world. Everyone has such an amazing and interesting, unique journey. And I just love hearing their journey. And of course, leadership roles don't just get doled out to anybody. It's not just the luck of the draw. It's how people handle their life and how they handle their experiences. And as Scripture says, if you're faithful in a little, God gives you more. And so I'm always interested in how people have taken the life that's God's given them and then just found a way to faithfully lead and serve and be a good steward, and then where that takes them, because it can take them on some very interesting journeys. So Adrian, welcome today to our podcast.
Well, thank you, Dr. Blackaby. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you.
Well, thank you. And tell us, just for those who don't know you, tell us just maybe some highlights. You're a leader, and you've had some really very interesting roles over the years. Give us a snapshot of who Adrian Bracy is.
Well, sure. Well, first, I am a child of God, wife, a mother. I've worked for over 40 years in the workplace, and most recently as the CEO of a nonprofit, a large nonprofit, YWCA. And prior to that, I spent 18 years working in the NFL. Most recently, my last job was as CFO for the Arizona Cardinals football team. And prior to that, I just worked in various positions out of college. I'm an accountant by trade and a CPA, and now I am retired and doing God's will.
Good. And I assume you were doing God's will before you retired. And now that...
Oh my gosh, yes. Now it's a whole nother level. You know, when you're out of the corporate business working place, you get to really spread your wings. So you're right. I've been doing God's will, Richard, for, oh my gosh, for a long time. Yes, I gave my life to the Lord at 10. So yes, for a long time.
Well, and you've worked for a couple of different football teams, haven't you, over the years?
Yes, the Miami Dolphins, St. Louis Rams, and the Arizona Cardinals football team.
Yeah, and we'll probably want to just kind of. I know for a lot of our football fan listeners, they'll be curious about that. What that kind of experience was like. And you've worked with the YWCA, and I know that you have a heart for working, especially with women and girls, and just helping them to become all that God has for them. And I picked up that that's one of the passions that you have, and I think that's just wonderful. Well, tell me, you've had such a diverse, from going from working for professional NFL football teams to leading YMCA or YWCA and just leading nonprofits and coaching, mentoring. You've had such a rich experience. But tell me, along the way, what have been some challenges for you? Because we've just discovered through all these podcasts, it seems, that it's never just a very a clear, simple, easy path. I think part of what becoming a leader involves is overcoming challenges. And what have been some that you faced in your journey?
I faced several, being a woman and then being a Black woman. So I've had the challenge of not being, I guess, taken seriously because I'm a woman. I don't think that I was ever totally disrespected, but there was an underlying not disrespect, so to speak, but more or less not really taking me seriously. That was one of the tough things that I had to overcome at an early age. So just being able to have the confidence and being 150% better than my male colleagues. And that's how I always had to feel that I had to be 150% better.
Wow. And I'm guessing, especially in a National Football League, a female. I don't know if are there certain male sort of dominated cultures or not, but any other just insight? I know I'm a Caucasian male, and I want to understand what others go through, and so as an African American female going into what I guess be considered a man's world in some ways, football league. Anything else that that you had to overcome? You said you had to do 150% instead of maybe a normal 50 or 100%, but anything else, especially, or maybe just even advice for, because I certainly, as a male myself, I want to be sensitive to what females face. I might be oblivious to it though, because it's not my world. But anything else that you like, advice or things that you saw that need to be addressed, or
Sure. So I remember even prior to the NFL, I worked in a male dominated environment. It was an aviation company. And my boss was originally from Israel. He left after 4 years. And when he left, his replacement came from Israel. And I was the controller of the company. And he really didn't feel comfortable working with a woman and then an African American woman. So he actually brought in a man over me as the chief of staff, so to speak, that I reported to this guy. And so that was my first real, and I was probably 30 years old or so. And Richard, when I can tell you the feeling that I had. And so one advice I would say is that at least give women an opportunity to show what they can do before you have that unconscious bias that you don't even realize that that you have this. A lot of people don't understand that what that means, but it's perception really. You look at me and you assume, well, she's 30, she's Black, she's a woman, so she definitely can't do this job, and that's just an unconscious bias before giving me the opportunity to let you see my skills. And then if there's something wrong or something that I'm not doing right, just tell me instead of just assuming that I cannot do the job. And so that was my first experience. And I would say, and I have, I had to tell a couple of my colleagues that don't just assume, don't you just give the give the woman an opportunity and then just help us. Just be more of a mentor instead of just assuming that I can't do the role. That was my first experience. It was a very tough one.
wow. And if you, just for all those who are either African American or female, do you have any advice for them? They're trying to make their way in this leadership world. Any advice to them? Because certainly there's been lots of discussion about that and disparities and injustice and so on. But in this world as it is, we can't function in worlds that don't exist. This is the world, but and we only get one chance at it. We only have one life to live. So any advice on saying, hey, if you're female, if you're African American, whatever it might be, here's some advice just as you enter into the leadership world yourself.
Sure. So what for sure I would advise is to make sure you know your job. That's the first thing is, and I always felt the reason why I had to be 150% is because I didn't want to give anyone an excuse not to promote me. So know your job, have confidence in your job. But if there's something on the job in leadership that you don't know, always, always ask. A lot of people are embarrassed, their ego, their pride, or maybe they just don't know. But if you're not sure, if you have an inkling that I really don't understand this project, whatever it is, as a leader, ask. And so that's the first thing I would say is to first of all be prepared, because you never know when that leadership opportunity is going to knock. You never know. So be prepared. I decided that I wanted to get my MBA. I already had my CPA, but I wanted to get my MBA because I didn't want to have an opportunity that came on my knocking at my door, and I didn't have that credential that I needed. And so happened that's exactly what I needed when I entered the NFL. I didn't know that at the time. But 2 years after working for the Miami Dolphins, the treasurer for the stadium resigned, but I had just like within 3 or 4 months uh, received my MBA, and that's what I needed. So being prepared, ask for help if you don't know, find a mentor, someone who, I joined the National Association of Black Accountants. And so I would suggest if there's a Black professional organization to join that Black professional organization, because in that organization, you're going to have people that understand who are like you and may have had experiences that you may encounter or you may have already encountered. But having that group, that organization that totally gets it. That was also important for me as well.
Oh, good. Well, and it sounds like I think all leaders, when you look back, you realize there were certain moments where we had aha moments, or we had maybe a mentor, a supervisor that just gave us some wise counsel that really helped. It might have been a book we read or a conference we went to. Might have just been an experience that God unpacked for us. But as you look back over your journey, are there some particular things you learned, insights that just really helped you? And maybe it was from a person who gave advice, might have been something you read, but what are some of those leadership lessons that have just really borne a lot of fruit over the course of your career?
So I've had several lessons, some good, some lessons I learned through experience. It wasn't really someone taught me; it was something that I experienced, and
Yeah.
it was a lesson that I learned. And so I was fortunate to have a family. My grandmother, who, when I was 19 or 20, the lesson she taught me was to be trustworthy, have integrity. She told me this. I was about 19 to 20, and I said, Grandma, how have you worked for this one family? She was a nanny for this one family for 40 years.
Wow.
But they would leave her with the key. They would leave for 2, 3 months and leave her with the key to the house. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, they lived on Miami Beach. And so that was a big deal in Miami at the time. And so she said, because they trust me, Adrian. When you start working, when you graduate from college, that's the key. And so that was one of the lessons that I learned earlier on. And I think is the reason, I believe is the reason why I am where I am today, is because of the integrity. And then, the other lesson I learned, and this is from my husband, when I went into the NFL, he said, Adrian, men don't always like a long story. So don't build the clock, just tell the time. And I didn't understand, like, don't build the clock, just tell the time. What do you mean? You don't have to tell the whole story. So when I come home, I would say, oh dear, he'll say, how was your day? And I would have told him the whole story. He said, no, stop. You're building me the clock. Just tell me the time. So that lesson really helped me in the boardroom with men, just get to the point. I don't have to tell a long story. So that was a really important lesson that I had to learn.
Interesting.
Another lesson I learned that really helped me in the male-dominated environment was not to be so emotional. A lot of times women are known to be emotional, and my husband doesn't like that. And I realized that in the boardroom with these men, I have to really don't let them see you sweat. That's real. And so those are just some of the lessons. But integrity, I think, was my first lesson at 19 from my grandmother that I adored, and
Wow.
and so that really propelled my career.
Now it sounds like you've had quite a legacy yourself. I mean, your parents, were they God followers? Was your grandparents?
Richard, I had a very interesting life. And I wrote a book, and I put in my book, my chapter one was called, I think it's My Story, my halftime story. And I
Tell
wrote
us your
it
name. We'll
halftime
have your
because,
book in the show notes so people can get
oh,
it. But
sure.
what is the name of the book
Okay.
here?
It's called Halftime, Learn to Pivot as a Leader and Identify the Next Step. I put halftime because for me and working in the NFL, that's where coaches get to evaluate what worked and what didn't work for the
Hmm.
first half. And are there any changes, any adjustments? Do we need to pivot? And so I've had to do that all my career.
Hmm.
My mom had a mental illness when I was born. She had a nervous breakdown and never recovered.
Hmm.
But she left me on the steps of family members. And then at 10, I was adopted by another family. And
Wow.
at 10 years old is when I learned about the Lord. And that's when I gave myself to the Lord. So I had a loving family, and especially at 10. So yes, I've been loved.
Wow.
I
And
am
how did
loved.
that, you sound like you handled that very healthily. But boy, I tell you, that people could have that same upbringing and have turned in lots of bad places and struggled. How did you come out so healthily through that?
It is only God. I really have to say that because I'm the youngest of six, and you're absolutely right. Some of my siblings, unfortunately, got caught up in that environment. We grew up in Liberty City area with drugs, prostitution. But at 10, I was adopted, and my adopted family took me out of Liberty City. And so my new mom and dad, we lived in the different areas, but my five siblings unfortunately remained in Liberty City in that environment. So
Hmm.
it was just God. I believe that.
Wow.
That's it. And
Wow.
and of course the Lord, but my mom, my adopted mom, she instilled in me. She said, Adrian, if you go to college, you can one day become a successful businesswoman. And I just believed her,
Wow.
And so
And
that's
you
yeah.
did.
So it was. And I am right.
That's wonderful. Well, I know that you do coaching and mentoring and so on. It's so great to see that you're investing all that you've learned into the next
Yes.
generation and to others. You're so generous with sharing what you've learned. And how do we, of course, our ministry has a coaching ministry too. We really believe in that approach.
Mhm.
And what kind of things when you're maybe you're working with, say, another woman or a young girl, what are you trying to accomplish with them? You're sitting down with them and interacting with them, and what kind of things are you trying to do as you try to help folks get to where God wants them to be?
Well, first, I explained to them the difference between coaching and mentoring because people think that as a coach that I have all the answers and that I'm going to give them all the answers. And I explained to them that's not really coaching. That's more of mentoring and advising and consulting. But as a coach, you have all the answers within you. My job is to ask the right questions to help pull that out. And if you do get stuck, then I can put another hat on, a consulting hat or a mentoring hat to help you get unstuck. And so what my desire and what I believe is my purpose is to help women and men if I have to coach men, but primarily it's been women
Men take
to
a lot more
help.
work, I'm sure.
They do. My husband, oh my gosh, yes. Oh, geez. Well, number one, he thinks he knows everything. So, men know everything. So
Yes,
that's a
right.
whole nother issue.
Yeah, and if they don't want to hear it from a woman anyway. So
No, no,
yeah,
you're
we
so
have so
right.
many issues. Don't we?
God bless you all. Uh, so really just helping women to achieve their goals and to become unstuck in whatever, whether it's personal, career. I have one client right now that I am just so thrilled because she wanted to quit her job, but through coaching, she's now flourishing on her job. So you don't have to leave a job to really to do God's will and for your life. And so she discovered that. So it's really helping her bring out what's already in her,
Hmm.
and just helping them to just trust and believe that God has that purpose for you. You just have to trust Him. And I'm fortunate to be able to coach women who are believers.
Hmm.
Um, And so that's kind of my niche is, but I've had women who are not believers, but they're more of career. They're just focused on their career, and so that's a whole different coaching
Yeah.
that I
And we
do with
should
them.
say you're in the St. Louis area, aren't you? So,
Correct.
so
Yes.
anyone looking for a coach, there's if you're in the St. Louis area, especially, any other issues that you see these days as you work with women in particular? Are there some kind of common threads that keep coming up, some common challenges, or is it kind of all over the map?
It's kind of all over the map, especially since COVID. A
Hmm.
lot of emotions, a lot of anxiety and stress. And so I do explain to women that if it's more of a medical, I suggest women to get a therapist,
Hmm.
because a lot of times, especially women of color, we just didn't grow up going to a counselor or to a therapist.
Hmm.
That was a no-no. You figure it out, or you go to God or whatever, but you never get help. You never go to a psychologist or anyone. So I always tell, if it's really serious, sometimes a coach is not enough.
Yeah.
You may need to get more professional help. So I'm seeing that now. Women are opening up to speaking to professional therapists, psychologists, or what have you. But one thing I think for a leader, for me, what was really important is being self-aware.
Hmm.
So as a leader, I think it's important, because when you're self-aware of yourself, it helps you to become self-aware of your team,
Hmm.
and then you have that discernment within your team of what different team members may need, because it's not one size fit all. And being able to identify that and make the change quickly. For in my life as a leader, I have actually kept the wrong person on the team way too long.
Hmm.
And that's one of the things that I think that if I could do it over again, is I would make sure, if I know the team member is not the right person, you need to make that change
Hmm. What
quickly.
causes you to do that? When you look back, what motivated you to keep someone even when you perhaps knew that they weren't the right fit?
That's a very good question. And now that I can look back, part of it was emotional hostage. That's what I call it,
Hmm.
because I was afraid that that particular person was actually going to file a lawsuit against me,
Hmm. Yeah.
because I had that in my previous, I had that before. A black person who actually filed a lawsuit against me for discrimination,
Wow.
black on black. So, and so this person was black as well, and I was, honestly, that's one of the main reasons I just didn't want to deal with the conflict. I didn't want to deal with the legal issues and all of that, and so
Hmm.
I allowed fear. It was fear.
Hmm.
Let's just call it what it is. It was fear of having to deal with that. So I kept the person, hoping that the person would leave, but that doesn't always happen. What has happened to me is then the team itself becomes dysfunctional,
Yeah.
because I allowed that person to stay. Instead of even, and maybe not even firing, maybe just putting that person in another role. Maybe they are just not right for that role. And so, as a leader, we have to know that. And sometimes it's just, but more likely it's fear. You're just
Wow.
afraid to let the person go for whatever reason, different fears, but a fear.
Yeah. I've just witnessed that a case I'm aware of someone that's obviously has emotional issues, but it's everyone else's fault, and so you just don't know what they're going to do. They're like a time bomb. You don't want them going off and you're on your watch, and so yeah, you oftentimes we're just it's great to be long suffering if there's hope and promise, but sometimes long suffering patience just means they're just more deeply embedded and they've done more damage before they leave. So yeah, that's a
That's a
tough
good
one.
point.
I think as a
That's a
Christian
tough
too,
one.
sometimes we feel like we're supposed to be long suffering, and I think we should be patient. But there's also an accountability to the organization we lead, that if there's something dysfunctional and broken, that we don't allow it to just continue either. There's some integrity involved there.
That is so true. And I've had both cases where I've been long suffering and it worked out.
Hmm.
I actually had an employee who was not the right at the time when I hired her. She didn't really have the skills, and I knew that. but the spirit just told me to keep her for whatever reason, and I did, and it turned out to be the best thing ever. I gave her another task, and she just, oh my gosh, she blew it out the water, and I thought, oh, so now she was in the wrong position, so I put her gave her another role, and so so that worked out. So I've had both cases
Wow.
in
Well,
leadership.
now you've worked for 3 different NFL teams, and there's I'm sure there's some football fans just drooling at the thought that you could work for 3 different football teams. Any sort of experiences or stories that for all of our football fans would think that that was just really a cool thing that you got to witness, or someone you got to meet, or just the inside workings? Of course there's always the stuff that happens on the field that's pretty important, but there's a whole lot of logistics happening off the field that enables those players to play the game. But anything that comes to mind that maybe was just a really interesting experience you had just because you were working with some of these football teams? Kind of putting you on the
Yes,
spot there.
actually. Oh no, it's great. So with the Miami Dolphins, of course, I had a chance to meet Don Shula and Dan Marino, so that was
Oh
exciting in
yeah,
itself.
yeah,
I was,
legends.
from Miami, so that was fun. And I just remember we were playing the Buffalo. It was the Buffalo Bills, and it was a home game, and we were favored. And the winner goes to the Super Bowl. And I had my clothes packed because we're going to win. We're at home. It's Dan Marino. Of course, we're going to win. So we packed, ready to go, and we lost. And
Oh,
that was like, oh my gosh, I was so hurt.
hmm.
But that's an experience I'll always remember. But the most experience with the Dolphins was when unfortunately the Robbie family, Joe Robbie, owned the Dolphins and the stadium. They didn't do the proper estate planning, so they end up selling the team to Wayne Huizinga, who was a businessman. And so when they sold it to Wayne, my career really flourished because it was a business model. We changed the entire financial system. It was just awesome. So that was an experience I'll remember forever. That's when we got into budgeting and departments being accountable. I took that experience with me to the St. Louis Rams and implemented that same experience with the Rams, and then to the Cardinals. So I'll always be thankful for that experience with Wayne Huizinga.
Hmm.
At the Rams, of course, it was working with such a great group, Coach Dick Vermeil,
Oh
and
yeah.
Kurt Warner. Kurt Warner is exactly what you see. He's
Oh
a
yeah.
man of
Have you seen
God,
the movie
loves the
about him
Lord.
that's out?
You know what? I have not. I'm embarrassed. I just, I'm waiting for it to come out. Is it out
Yeah.
streaming? That's what I'm waiting
Oh,
for
okay. I
because
don't know. Yeah, but I've heard great things.
I don't know.
My dad actually,
I heard
when
it's
the year
great.
that he won the Super Bowl, was MVP. My dad actually was the chaplain to the football teams on the Super Bowl, and actually led a worship time with Kurt Warner and the Christians who came, and Warner actually signed a football card for each of my dad's kids, and so that was really special to us, and my dad felt the same way. Felt he was the real deal.
He's the real deal.
Yeah. What was Shula and
Yes.
those guys like? Marino did. It's always interesting. You see
Different.
them on TV, but you
Yeah.
off camera, it's gonna be a
Yes.
different story.
Yes, they weren't. Coach Don Shula and Coach Dick Vermeil, two totally different people. Dan Marino and Kurt Warner, totally different.
Hmm.
The Dolphins with Coach Shula and Dan Marino, they were more of the old school, just that old school mentality. Women, you're not to come anywhere near the players. Whereas at the Rams, we're like family. For
Hmm.
12 years, I was with the Rams. My son played with uh, Isaac Bruce, throwing the ball.
Hmm.
Kurt was down in the training facility. He would throw the ball to the kids. And so that was more of a family oriented environment. And I think that's probably why I stayed for 12 years.
Hmm.
And then, of course, going to the Super Bowl was fun. But then the Arizona Cardinals was a different environment from the other two, but was more like the Dolphins.
Hmm.
And I remember when I first took the job with the Arizona Cardinals, I had to send a guy downstairs to the locker room to tell Kurt that I was here. And he came up and we hugged. And I said, Kurt, we're going to go to the Super Bowl. And of course, in 2009, we actually did go to the Super Bowl. So that was fun. That
Uh,
was fun. So
wow.
I had a chance to work with Kurt at the Rams and with the Arizona Cardinals. So that was nice.
Wow. Did maybe just one last question for you, Adrian? I just, you've worked in some pretty secular settings, and yet I have a sense that God has certainly guided you as a leader, even when you weren't. We like to emphasize God can be involved in your leadership, whether you're a pastor of a church or you're working for a professional football team. God is just as involved. Any lessons you learned, or anything in particular where God's presence in your life just really enabled you to be successful or overcome a challenge?
Sure. And I believe I was successful because I always put God first. I mean, I wore it on my sleeves. No one, I didn't have that sexual harassment experience that some women go through. And I truly believe it's because I wore my love for God outwardly. So I really fortunately, I've had those incidents here and there, but nothing that I could really even be upset. It was just one of those things. But what really, I really think I started a women's prayer group with the St. Louis Rams. And I remember one in particular young lady who had never been to church. She just didn't go to church. She doesn't believe in church, but she accepted the Lord during our prayer service. It was Bible study, actually. And so that I will remember. I'll remember that the rest of
Wow.
my life. And I think that really helped me to, the good thing with the NFL, that, they allow prayer and Bible study. They embraced the players who embraced the Lord. So there was never a shunning of anything. So when I wanted to start a women's Bible study, of course, absolutely. On the contrary, now I went to the YWCA, which is Young Women's Christian Association, and it was not
Oh,
accepted
really?
so much. Yes, and that was so stunning to me. Like, Adrian, because I would pray before we had a staff meeting. We had 300 employees, and I wanted to open up in prayer. But Adrian, that if we don't know if we can do that, and we get federal money, and you're not supposed to pray. And but I did. I did anyways.
Somehow, I'm not surprised. Well, Adrian, I knew that our time would fly by because you are such an interesting person and have done so many amazing things. And what an encouragement that is, though. What an inspiration. I really encourage people to get her book. We'll leave links to it in the show notes so you can find it. And if you live in the St. Louis area, boy, I tell you, if you can connect with her, if you're looking for a coach, she's just a valuable resource and a treasure for God's kingdom. And so thank you for just letting us get a chance to get to know you and hear a little bit of your story. What an inspiration. And I have a firm conviction that the story's not yet over with you. I have a feeling God's going to take everything that he's built into your life and use it for some great things to come still.
Praise God. Praise God. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity, Dr. Blackaby, for being on your podcast, your show. And I just pray God's continued blessings upon you and your ministry and all the listeners. God bless.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.